The Galtons were a family from Birmingham, England. They were Quakers who were also gun manufacturers. In the 17th and 18th century, guns did not have the same connotation as they do today, as they were mostly used to hunt game and protect property, especially crops, from wildlife. However, as England began to assert its dominance over the world, this eventually came into conflict with the unchristian nature of war, a bedrock of the Quaker faith. When Samuel Galton Jr. was confronted by his congregation about his role in British conquest, he was quick to point out that other Quakers owned banks that helped fund the imperial war machine, produced iron that he personally used to manufacture his weapons, and that every time a Quaker made a purchase because of the tax, it was an act of supporting state violence. Galton argued that even if he were to do nothing but sit at home and twiddle his thumbs and lawfully pay his taxes, he would still be complicit in war and conquest because the system gives him no other option. Samuel Galton Jr. felt that his fellow Quakers were all complicit and were arguing degrees instead of principles. And because there was no option, the degree to which you were willing to participate in the global war machine was a personal matter. I'm going to assume that you find slavery appalling. Yet your shoes are made in China, your pants in Vietnam, and your shirt in Bangladesh. Today, there are more slaves in the world than there were at the height of cotton production in the American South 200 years ago, and it is financially supported by people like us. Do I think you and I are bad people? No. I understand that there are systemic constraints that stop us from distancing ourselves from things we find appalling. That's the reason I didn't find it hypocritical that candidate Trump promised to bring jobs back to America while his companies used foreign labor, or why Bernie Sanders won't personally pay the rates in his plan until it's implemented. It's why I don't find it hypocritical that free market libertarians use modern technology even though it was all developed in the state sector, or why socialists buy products from Amazon. Author Priya Satya writes, "If every protest we do is about preserving our own conscience, then the more we avoid our collective complicity or systemic complicity, the better we feel. If our protest is really about achieving some kind of real change, we need to think more about entire systems. But instead, we have now accepted the natural order as it is and try to find particular problems in it to fix. This doesn't absolve us from personal responsibility or relieve us from leading by example, but it is important to put things in perspective. What's the systemic effect of biking to work when a mere 100 corporations are responsible for 71% of all global carbon emissions?" Many people see corporate CEOs as evil human beings out to destroy the world. And while good people are not attracted to power, it's a little more complicated. The CEOs of fossil fuel companies know full well they're mortgaging the future of their grandchildren, but what are their choices? They can continue their role in destroying the planet and reap the short-term rewards for themselves, or they can refuse to partake and someone else fills their role and nothing changes because that's the logic of our current system. And because capitalism is psychopathic, it attracts psychopaths. The system rewards us on virtually every level for doing the wrong thing. Psychopathic people rise to positions of power in the capitalist system because they're able to do things the rest of us are not capable of. They can go in and gut a business with no regard for the families of employees or the effects on the community. And when psychopaths get into positions of power, they shape the world to fit the way they see it. That is, that everything is there to serve them. Capitalism attracts people that are good at extracting money from the weak, vulnerable, and ignorant. That's why jobs like middle managers, salesmen, technocrats, rent seekers, and money manipulators have increased, while jobs that produced real value like mechanics, carpenters, plumbers, and nurses have been completely devalued by our society. The Jewish political theorist Hannah Arendt, who fled Germany during Hitler's rise to power, documented the famous trial of Adolf Eichmann in her book Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, where she wrote, "The trouble with Eichmann was precisely that there were so many like him, and that the many were neither perverted nor sadistic, that they were, and still are, terribly and terrifyingly normal. From the viewpoint of our legal institutions and of our moral standards of judgment, this normality was much more terrifying than all the atrocities put together. It wasn't just the SS that was responsible for the horrors in Nazi Germany. Someone had to make the trains run on time. And while the US is certainly not Nazi Germany, we all, metaphorically speaking, make the trains run on time, even though we like to think we don't." Author Upton Sinclair said, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding." The entire capitalist system is inequitable and exploitative, dependent on conquest and growth. Nothing is ever enough. The law requires executives to maximize profit for their shareholders. The system makes it nearly impossible for you to do anything to affect change on your own. So what is one to do? Pulitzer Prize-winning author Chris Hedges writes, "Becoming a part of a social movement is the only way to respond to these issues. There is no time to play the game of politics. The question is not how do we get good people to rule, because most people attracted to power are mediocre at best. Instead, the question is, how do you make the power elite frightened of you?" In 1971, there was such a giant anti-war demonstration in Washington, D.C. that President Richard Nixon had empty city buses surround the White House bumper to bumper as a barricade. According to Henry Kissinger's memoir, Nixon was still worried that the protesters would break through. And that is exactly where you want people in power to be. Thanks for watching.